Your life may not be controlled by what happens to you. It may be controlled by what you repeatedly tell yourself about what happens to you. Think about that for a moment. Every morning, before you speak to another person, before you check your phone, before you step into the world, there is already a conversation taking place. It is happening inside your mind. And that conversation matters. Because the thoughts you repeat become familiar. The familiar becomes believable. What you believe influences how you feel influences how you act. And what you repeatedly do begins to shape the life you experience. Maybe you have been telling yourself that you are behind, that you are not talented enough, that you missed your opportunity, that other people are luckier than you, that you are too old, too young, too inexperienced, too damaged. Maybe you have quietly convinced yourself that your circumstances are permanent, and perhaps nobody else knows how exhausting that internal conversation has become. You smile, you go to work, you answer messages, you take care of responsibilities. But somewhere beneath the surface, you are fighting a battle nobody can see, a battle between who you are today and who you know you could become. This is where your transformation begins. Not when everything around you changes, not when someone finally gives you permission, not when the perfect opportunity arrives. It begins when you become conscious of the mind that has been shaping your decisions, because your circumstances may be real, your problems may be real, your disappointments may be real, but the story you attach to them is something you can begin to change. Failure can become proof that you are incapable, or it can become evidence that you are learning. Rejection can become a reason to hide, or it can become an invitation to become stronger. A difficult season can convince you that your life is falling apart, or it can become the season in which you discover what you are truly capable of. The event is one thing. The meaning you give the event is another, and that meaning can change everything. You do not need to lie to yourself. You do not need to pretend that pain doesn't exist. You do not need to repeat empty positive statements while ignoring reality. You need something deeper. You need to learn how to direct your mind, to question the thoughts that weaken you, to challenge the beliefs that limit you, to stop allowing fear to make every decision, and to consciously build a mind capable of carrying you toward the life you want. Because your mind is not merely where you think, it is where you interpret, where you imagine, where you decide, where you rehearse your future before you ever live it. And if you constantly rehearse defeat, you begin to expect defeat. But if you repeatedly train yourself to see possibility, responsibility, courage, and action, you begin to respond differently. And when you respond differently, your life begins to move differently. So for the next 30 minutes, forget the person you have been told you have to be. Forget the limitations you have accepted without questioning. Forget the voice that says, "This is just who I am," because perhaps it isn't. Perhaps you are not stuck. Perhaps you have simply practiced the same thoughts for so long that they began to feel like truth. And perhaps the first step toward changing your life is changing the conversation happening inside your mind. This is where it begins, not outside you, inside you, one thought at a time. A thought can feel incredibly powerful. It can arrive suddenly and change your entire mood. One moment you are calm, the next, a single thought appears. What if I fail? And suddenly your chest tightens. Your confidence disappears. You begin imagining everything that could go wrong. You haven't failed. Nothing has actually happened. But your mind has already created a future filled with fear. This is one of the greatest lessons you can learn about your mind. Not every thought deserves to be believed. Ride that again in your mind. Not every thought deserves to be believed. Your mind produces thoughts constantly. Some are useful. Some are memories. Some are predictions. Some are fears. Some are old beliefs repeating themselves. And some are simply noise. But because a thought appears inside your mind, you may automatically assume it must be true. That is where the problem begins. You think, I'm not good enough. And instead of questioning it, you accept it. You think, I'll never succeed. You accept it. You think, people are going to judge me. You accept it. You think, it's too late for me. You accept it. Eventually, these thoughts stop sounding like thoughts. They begin sounding like facts. And once a thought becomes a belief, you start making decisions based on it. You stop applying for the opportunity. You stop starting the business. You stop speaking up. You stop creating. You stop taking risks. You stop trying. Not because you are incapable, but because your mind convinced you that trying was pointless. This is how invisible limitations are created. You don't always need a physical wall to stop someone. Sometimes a belief is enough. Imagine two people standing at the beginning of the same difficult journey. Both are afraid. Both are uncertain. Both have limited experience. The first person thinks, this is proof that I can't do it. The second thinks, this is difficult, but I can learn. Same challenge, different interpretation, different emotional response, different behavior, and eventually, potentially, a completely different destination. The difference wasn't necessarily intelligence. It wasn't necessarily talent. It wasn't necessarily luck. It was the meaning they gave to the challenge. This is why learning to observe your thoughts is so important. You need to create distance between you and the thought. Instead of saying, I am a failure, say, I am having the thought that I failed. Instead of, I am weak, say, I am experiencing a moment where I feel weak. Instead of, I can't do this, ask, what makes me believe I can't? That small change creates something incredibly powerful. Space. Space between the thought and your identity. Space between the emotion and your reaction. Space between what happened and what you decide it means. And inside that space, you have a choice. You can choose what you believe. You can choose what you focus on. You can choose what you do next. This does not mean you can control every thought that enters your mind. You cannot. A painful memory may appear. A fear may surface. Doubt may return. Your mind may remind you of every mistake you have ever made. But you do not have to build a house around every thought that knocks on your door. Let the thought arrive. Observe it. Question it. Then decide whether it deserves your attention. This is mental strength. Mental strength is not having a mind that never experiences fear. It is having a mind that can experience fear without automatically obeying it. It is being able to say, yes, I am afraid, and I am moving forward anyway. It is being able to say, yes, I made a mistake, and I can learn from it. It is being able to say, yes, my past was painful, but my past does not get to write every chapter of my future. Your history can explain you, but it does not have to imprison you. The person you were yesterday does not have to be the person you become tomorrow. You can change, you can learn, you can rebuild, you can develop discipline where there was once procrastination, confidence where there was once self-doubt, peace where there was once constant overthinking, courage where there was once fear. But it begins with awareness. So tonight, or whenever you are listening to this, pay attention to the voice inside your head. Listen carefully. What does it say when you make a mistake? What does it say when someone succeeds? What does it say when you see someone living the life you want? What does it say when an opportunity appears? Does it tell you to move forward? Or does it immediately give you 10 reasons to stay where you are? Because your internal dialogue is revealing something important. It is showing you the beliefs that have been directing your behavior. And once you can see those beliefs, you can begin to change them. You don't have to fight every negative thought. You don't have to become positive every second of every day. You simply have to stop treating every thought as a command. A thought is not an order. A thought is not a prophecy. A thought is not your identity. And a thought is certainly not your destiny. You are the one who decides what you do with it. So when the old voice returns and says, you can't, pause and ask, what if I can learn? When it says, it's too late, ask, what can I begin today? When it says, "You're not good enough." Ask, "What would happen if I became better instead of waiting to feel good enough?" And when your mind says, "This is impossible," remember, you don't have to solve your entire life today. You only have to take the next step, because transformation rarely begins with a massive breakthrough. It begins with a small decision, a different thought, a different response, a different action, repeated again and again and again, until the mind that once held you back becomes the mind that carries you forward. There is a pattern quietly operating behind much of your life. You may not see it, you may not notice it, but it is there. A thought becomes a belief. A belief influences your emotions. Your emotions influence your actions. Your actions become habits. And your habits begin to shape your identity. Your identity influences the choices you make. And those choices eventually create the life you experience. Think about how powerful that is. Your life is not created only by the big decisions you make once in a while. It is created by the small decisions you repeat every day. And many of those decisions begin with something almost invisible. A thought. It might begin with, "I can't. I don't have what it takes. I'm always unlucky. People like me don't succeed. I'll start tomorrow. I need to feel motivated first." At first, these words may seem harmless, but repetition changes things. A thought repeated often enough begins to feel familiar, and the human mind tends to trust what feels familiar. Soon, the thought becomes a belief. You no longer simply think, "I might fail." You begin to believe, "I am someone who fails." That is a completely different statement. One describes a possibility. The other describes an identity. And identity has enormous power, because once you believe something about yourself, you begin looking for evidence to prove it. If you believe you are not confident, you notice every awkward conversation. If you believe you are bad with money, you notice every financial mistake. If you believe you are lazy, you interpret a difficult day as proof. If you believe you are incapable, every obstacle becomes confirmation. Your mind begins filtering reality through the belief you already carry. This is why changing your life requires more than simply changing your circumstances. You must examine the beliefs through which you interpret those circumstances. Let's take procrastination. Imagine someone who repeatedly thinks, "I'll do it later." One day passes, then another. Eventually, procrastination becomes a habit. And after months or years of repeating it, the person may begin saying, "I'm just not disciplined." Now notice what has happened. A temporary behavior has become an identity. The person no longer sees procrastination as something they do. They see it as something they are. And because they believe it is part of who they are, they continue behaving accordingly. The cycle reinforces itself. Thought, belief, action, evidence, stronger belief, more action, and eventually, identity. But here is the good news. The loop works in both directions. If negative thinking can create negative patterns, intentional thinking can help create stronger ones. Imagine replacing, "I can't do this," with, "I don't know how to do this yet." That tiny word changes everything. Yet, it leaves the door open. Now the belief becomes, "I can learn." That belief creates a different emotional state. Instead of helplessness, there is curiosity. Instead of avoidance, there is experimentation. Instead of saying, "I can't," you begin asking, "How can I?" And that question changes your behavior. You search, you practice, you study, you make mistakes, you adjust, you try again. And every attempt gives your mind new evidence. Evidence that says, "Maybe I am capable." Then something begins to happen. The belief becomes stronger. The actions become more consistent. And your identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying to become disciplined. You begin seeing yourself as someone who keeps promises to themselves. That distinction matters, because lasting change is not simply about forcing yourself to behave differently. It is about becoming a different kind of person through repeated behavior. Consider someone who wants to become physically stronger. They don't become strong because they watched a motivational video. They become strong because they repeatedly train. One workout doesn't transform the body, but hundreds of workouts can. The same principle applies to the mind. One positive thought will not erase years of negative conditioning. One productive day will not instantly create discipline. One courageous decision will not eliminate fear forever. But repetition creates evidence. And evidence changes belief. This is why small victories matter. Getting up when you said you would, finishing the task you wanted to avoid, putting the phone away when you need to focus, going for the workout even when you don't feel like it, reading instead of endlessly scrolling, saving instead of impulsively spending, speaking honestly instead of hiding behind fear. Every time you act according to the person you want to become, you send a message to your own mind. This is who I am becoming. And your mind begins collecting evidence. You become someone who follows through, someone who can tolerate discomfort, someone who can focus, someone who can delay gratification, someone who can keep moving when motivation disappears. This is how self-respect is built, not through words alone, through evidence, through action, through keeping promises to yourself. And this brings us to one of the most important principles in personal development. You cannot think your way into a completely different life while continuing to act the same way. Your thoughts matter, but your thoughts must eventually become behavior. You can think about exercising all day. Your body doesn't change until you move. You can think about starting a business. The business doesn't exist until you take action. You can imagine becoming financially successful, but financial success requires decisions, skills, discipline, patience, and consistent behavior. Thought is the beginning. Action is the bridge. Repetition is what builds the road. So don't underestimate the small decisions you make today. The 5 minutes of focused work, the difficult conversation, the page you read, the workout you complete, the expense you avoid, the temptation you resist, the negative thought you challenge. None of these moments may look extraordinary, but together, they are creating something. They are creating you. And eventually, the person you become will determine the life you are capable of building. So ask yourself, what thoughts have I been repeating? What beliefs have those thoughts created? What actions have those beliefs produced? And where are those actions taking me? Don't ask these questions to judge yourself. Ask them to become conscious, because you cannot change a pattern you refuse to see. If the loop is taking you somewhere you don't want to go, interrupt it. Catch the thought, question the belief, chant the action, repeat the new behavior, and give it time. You don't need to rebuild your entire life tonight. You need to begin creating a new loop, a stronger thought, a stronger belief, a better action, a better habit, a stronger identity, and eventually, a different life. Because the life you want may not begin with changing everything around you. It may begin with changing what happens inside you. Before you take your next step, there is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It comes from fighting the same thoughts every day. You wake up and your mind is already running. What if something goes wrong? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I made the wrong decision? What if I'm wasting my life? What if I'm not where I should be? And before the day has even begun, you are already tired. This is what constant negative thinking can do. It doesn't always arrive as one dramatic thought. Sometimes it is subtle, a quiet criticism, a comparison, a memory, a prediction, a sentence you barely notice because you've heard it so many times. I'm behind. I'm not enough. Everyone else is doing better. I always mess things up. Nothing ever works for me. I'll never get there. The danger is not that you have one negative thought. The danger is allowing that thought to become a permanent environment. Because when you live inside negative thinking long enough, negativity can begin to feel normal. You stop questioning it. You simply accept it as reality. But there is a difference between reality and your interpretation of reality. Something difficult can happen without meaning that your entire life is going wrong. Someone can reject you without meaning that you are worthless. You can fail without becoming a failure. You can be uncertain without being lost forever. You can have a bad day without having a bad life. Your mind will sometimes try to turn one moment into an entire story. You miss one opportunity, and suddenly, I never get opportunities. You make one mistake, and suddenly, I always ruin everything. Someone succeeds before you, and suddenly, I'll never succeed. Notice the pattern. One event becomes a conclusion. The conclusion becomes a belief. The belief influences your behavior, and the behavior creates more evidence for the belief. That is the negative thinking cycle. So, how do you break it? You begin with the first step. Notice. You cannot change what you don't recognize. The next time you feel overwhelmed, stop for a moment. Don't immediately react. Ask yourself, what exactly am I thinking right now? Not what happened. Not what you fear might happen. What are you actually saying to yourself? Maybe you're thinking, I can't handle this. Write it down, then look at it. Ask, is this completely true? Maybe the answer is no. Maybe what is actually true is, this is difficult, but I have handled difficult things before. That is not pretending. That is perspective. Or perhaps your thought is, I'm falling behind everyone else. Ask, compared to whom? According to what timeline? Do I actually know what is happening in their life? Comparing often creates suffering because you compare your private reality with someone else's public appearance. You see their success. You don't see their uncertainty. You see the result. You don't see the years of work. You see the highlight. You don't see the struggle. And then you use incomplete information to judge your entire life. Stop doing that. Your journey does not need to look like someone else's journey to be meaningful. Another major source of negative thinking is the past. Your mind may replay old conversations, old mistakes, old embarrassments, things you wish you had said differently, things you wish you had never done. But there is something you must understand. You cannot edit yesterday by punishing yourself today. Learn from it. Take responsibility where necessary. Apologize when appropriate. Change your behavior. But don't turn guilt into an identity. You are allowed to grow beyond the person who made the mistake. You are allowed to become wiser. You are allowed to begin again. Then there is the future. The mind loves to create imaginary disasters. You haven't lost the job, but you're imagining losing it. The relationship hasn't ended, but you're imagining it ending. The opportunity hasn't failed, but you're already imagining failure. And suddenly, you are experiencing emotional pain from an event that hasn't even happened. This is why you must learn to return to the present. Ask, what is actually happening right now? Not tomorrow, not next year, not 10 years from now, right now. Maybe right now you are safe. Maybe right now you have another chance. Maybe right now there is one thing you can do. Focus there. Because anxiety often grows when your mind tries to solve a future that doesn't exist yet. You don't need to solve your entire future today. You need to handle today. And sometimes, you only need to handle the next hour, the next task, the next conversation, the next decision, the next breath. This is how you regain control, not by controlling everything, but by returning your attention to what you can influence. There is another powerful practice. Change the question. Instead of, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what can this teach me? Instead of, why am I so far behind? Ask, what is one step I can take today? Instead of, what if I fail? Ask, what would I attempt if I knew failure was part of learning? Instead of, what's wrong with me? Ask, what do I need to improve? The quality of your questions influences the quality of the thoughts that follow. A mind constantly asking, what's wrong, will search for problems. A mind asking, what can I do, will begin searching for solutions. This doesn't mean you should ignore problems. It means you should approach problems from a position of responsibility rather than helplessness. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: you don't have to eliminate every negative thought. That is impossible. You simply need to stop feeding them. A negative thought may appear. Let it appear. Observe it. Question it. Then redirect your attention. You don't need to wrestle with it for an hour. You don't need to prove it wrong every time. Sometimes the healthiest response is simply, "That's a thought. I don't need to follow it." Then return to what matters: your work, your family, your health, your purpose, your next step. Every time you redirect your attention, you are practicing mental discipline. And just like physical strength, mental strength develops through repetition. The first time you interrupt a negative thought, it may feel difficult. The 10th time, you notice it faster. Eventually, you become better at recognizing the pattern before it controls you. That is progress, not a perfectly positive mind, a more conscious mind. A mind that can observe fear without becoming fear. A mind that can experience uncertainty without surrendering to it. A mind that can acknowledge pain without allowing pain to define the future. So tonight, listen to yourself. Pay attention to the language you use. Would you speak to someone you love the way you speak to yourself? If not, why? You don't need to flatter yourself. You need to become fair with yourself. Challenge yourself. Correct yourself. But don't destroy yourself. You are trying to build a better life. You need a mind that helps you build it. So when the old voice says, "You can't," answer, "I can learn." When it says, "It's too late," answer, "I can begin now." When it says, "You're not enough," answer, "I can grow." When it says, "Everything is falling apart," answer, "I will focus on what I can control." And when the mind becomes loud, become still. Take a breath. Return to the present. Choose your next thought carefully, because your mind is listening, and every time you choose a better thought, you are teaching it a new way to live. There is a part of your mind that is listening. Even when you are not paying attention, it listens to the words you repeat, the stories you tell yourself, the expectations you carry, the things you repeatedly imagine. And over time, those repeated messages can become deeply familiar patterns. You may not consciously decide to believe them, but repetition can make them feel natural. This is why the way you speak to yourself matters. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I am not disciplined," eventually that statement can become part of your self-image. If you constantly say, "I am terrible with money," you may begin making financial decisions from that identity. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I never finish anything," you may unconsciously expect yourself to quit. And once you expect a certain version of yourself, you begin behaving in ways that support that expectation. This is the hidden power of self-image. You don't always behave according to what you want. You often behave according to what you believe you are. Think about someone who wants to become confident. They may tell themselves, "I want to be confident." But underneath that desire is another belief. "I'm naturally shy." So when an opportunity appears to speak, lead, create, or take responsibility, the old identity speaks first. "That's not who you are. People will judge you. Stay quiet. Don't risk embarrassing yourself." And the person listens, not because they consciously chose failure, but because they were acting consistently with an identity they had practiced for years. This is why transformation requires more than setting goals. You must begin changing the person you believe you are becoming. Instead of saying, "I need to become disciplined," begin thinking, "I am becoming someone who keeps promises to myself." Instead of, "I wish I were confident," say, "I am practicing courage." Instead of, "I want to stop procrastinating," say, "I take action even when I don't feel ready." Notice the difference. The first statements describe a distant destination. The second describe an identity being built through action. And that distinction matters, because your subconscious patterns are not changed by one emotional speech. They are changed through repetition, through consistent experiences, through behavior that provides new evidence. Imagine you have spent 10 years telling yourself that you cannot focus. You cannot expect one morning of concentration to completely erase that belief. But what happens when you begin practicing focus every day? 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. You begin proving something to yourself. I can focus. That evidence matters. The mind begins updating its expectations. The same thing happens with discipline. Keep one promise to yourself, then another, then another. Eventually, something changes. You don't need to constantly convince yourself that you're disciplined. Your behavior begins proving it. And this is one of the most powerful ways to rebuild self-confidence. Keep promises to yourself. When you say you will wake up at a certain time, try to wake up. When you say you will exercise, show up. When you say you will complete a task, finish it. When you say you will spend less time scrolling, put the phone away. These actions may seem small, but psychologically, they communicate something powerful. Kaizen, I can trust myself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not always created by telling yourself that you are amazing. Sometimes it is created by repeatedly proving to yourself that you can depend on yourself. Your subconscious mind learns through experience. It learns, this is what I do. This is how I respond. This is who I am. So begin giving it better evidence. If you want to become healthier, don't wait until you feel like a healthy person. Start behaving like someone who values their health. If you want to become successful, don't spend all day imagining success. Practice the behaviors that successful people require. Learning, focus, patience, consistency, responsibility. If you want peace, stop feeding every thought that demands your attention. Create moments of silence. Protect your attention. Slow down. If you want confidence, stop waiting for fear to disappear. Take small, courageous actions while fear is still present. Your identity changes when your behavior changes repeatedly. And your behavior is influenced by what you repeatedly expect from yourself. This is why your internal language deserves attention. Listen to what you say when nobody else is around. I always mess things up. I can't handle pressure. I'm terrible at this. I never get lucky. I'm just lazy. I'm not a disciplined person. These statements may sound harmless, but ask yourself, what if I stopped describing my weaknesses as permanent identities? What if instead of saying, I'm lazy, you said, I've developed habits of avoidance, and I can change them? Instead of, I'm bad at this, say, I haven't developed this skill yet. Instead of, I always fail, say, I've experienced failure, and I can learn from it. That word again, yet, it creates possibility. It tells your mind, this is not the final version of me. And perhaps that is one of the most important beliefs you can develop. You are not finished. You are still learning, still growing, still becoming. The version of you that exists today is the result of thousands of experiences, choices, habits, influences, and beliefs. But that doesn't mean your current identity is permanent. You are still writing, and every day gives you another opportunity to provide new evidence. This doesn't mean you should repeat unrealistic statements and expect the universe to magically change your circumstances. Your mind is powerful, but your mind must eventually meet reality through action. If you say, I am disciplined, but never practice discipline, the statement remains empty. If you say, I am confident, but constantly avoid every uncomfortable situation, the belief has no evidence behind it. So don't just repeat better thoughts, live them. Think, I am disciplined, then do the difficult thing. Think, I am courageous. Then have the difficult conversation. Think, I am capable of learning. Then open the book. Think, I am building a better future. Then make the decision your future self will thank you for. That is how thoughts become beliefs, and beliefs become identity. Your subconscious mind is constantly receiving information from your behavior. Every action is a message. Every habit is a message. Every choice is a message. So ask yourself, what am I teaching my mind about who I am? When you quit every time something becomes difficult, you teach your mind, I quit. When you keep going despite discomfort, you teach, I persevere. When you constantly avoid responsibility, you teach, I cannot handle pressure. When you take responsibility, you teach, I can handle difficult things. When you repeatedly choose distraction, you teach, my attention is not valuable. When you protect your attention, you teach, my goals matter. You are training yourself every day. The question is not whether you are being programmed. The question is, what are you programming yourself to become? So from this moment forward, become more careful with the words you repeat. Not because every thought has magical power, but because repeated thoughts influence what you notice, what you expect, what you attempt, and how you behave. Speak to yourself with honesty, but also speak with possibility. Don't say, this is who I am. Say, this is where I am. Don't say, I will always be this way. Say, I am learning a new way. Don't say, I can't change. Say, I can begin changing one behavior at a time. Because your mind is listening, your habits are listening, your future decisions are listening. And every day, through your thoughts and your actions, you are answering one question. Who am I becoming? Make sure your answer is someone you are proud to meet. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize something uncomfortable. The world is not going to become perfectly calm just because you want peace. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Money will become tight. Opportunities will disappear. Someone will misunderstand you. Someone will criticize you. You will experience rejection. You will make mistakes. And sometimes, life will simply refuse to cooperate with your plans. You cannot control all of that, but you can learn to control what happens next. Because the greatest battle is often not against the situation. It is against the reaction inside your own mind. Something happens, your mind immediately interprets it. Then emotion follows, then impulse, then action. And sometimes, one emotional reaction creates consequences that last far longer than the original problem. Someone insults you. You react immediately. You send the message. You say the words. You make the decision. Then hours later, when the emotion has disappeared, you realize, I wish I had handled that differently. This is why mastering your mind matters. Not so that you never feel anger, not so that you never feel fear, not so that you become emotionless, but so that your emotions stop controlling every decision you make. Mental strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without automatically obeying it. You can feel angry and choose not to attack. You can feel afraid and choose to move forward. You can feel discouraged and choose to continue. You can feel tempted and choose discipline. You can feel overwhelmed and choose to slow down. There is a space between what happens to you and what you do about it. That space may only last a few seconds, but those seconds can change your life. So practice the pause. When something triggers you, don't immediately respond. Pause. Take a breath. Notice what is happening inside you. Ask, what am I feeling? Then, what am I thinking? Then, what do I want to do? And finally, what would the strongest version of me do next? That final question can interrupt an entire emotional pattern. Because the strongest version of you doesn't always choose what feels good. They choose what serves the future. Imagine someone criticizing your work. Your first reaction might be, who are they to judge me? Your ego wants to defend itself. But pause. What if there is something useful inside the criticism? You don't have to accept every opinion. You don't have to allow disrespect. But you can separate your identity from information. Ask, is there something here I can learn? That is strength. Now imagine rejection. Your mind says, they rejected me because I'm not good enough. Pause. Is that actually the only explanation? Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe the opportunity wasn't right. Maybe there were factors you couldn't see. Maybe you need to improve. Whatever the reason, you don't have to turn one rejection into a permanent judgment against yourself. You can experience disappointment without becoming defeated. This is emotional discipline. And emotional discipline becomes especially important when life becomes difficult, because anyone can remain calm when everything is going according to plan. The real test is what happens when the plan collapses, when the market falls, when the business struggles, when the relationship changes, when the interview doesn't work out, when the dream takes longer than expected, when you realize that the path you imagined is no longer available. In those moments, your mind will want certainty. It will want answers immediately. It will want someone to blame. It may tell you, this is the end, but you don't need to know how the entire story ends. You only need to know what you can do next. That is where control begins. Focus on what you can control: your effort, your preparation, your attention, your words, your habits, your decisions, your response. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control whether you show up prepared. You cannot control what people think, but you can control how you treat people. You cannot control the past, but you can control what you learn from it. You cannot control tomorrow, but you can influence what you do today. This is where mental strength becomes practical. It stops being an abstract idea. It becomes a daily practice. When your phone distracts you, can you put it down? When you want to quit, can you continue for another 10 minutes? When anger rises, can you wait before speaking? When fear appears, can you take one step anyway? When temptation arrives, can you remember what you said you wanted? These moments are training grounds. You don't build self-control when everything is easy. You build it when your mind says, give in, and you calmly answer, not this time. Every time you do that, you strengthen your ability to choose. And choice is freedom. Without self-control, your impulses become your master. Whatever feels good becomes the priority. Whatever feels uncomfortable gets avoided. Whatever demands your attention gets it. Whatever emotion appears becomes your command. But when you develop mental discipline, something changes. You stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And you begin asking, what needs to be done? That question can transform your life, because your goals will often require actions your emotions don't feel like taking. You may not feel like studying. Study anyway. You may not feel like exercising. Move anyway. You may not feel like having the difficult conversation. Have it respectfully. You may not feel like starting. Start anyway. You may not feel confident. Take the step anyway. Confidence often comes after action. Discipline often comes before motivation. Courage often comes before certainty. And progress often begins before you feel ready. This is why you must stop waiting for the perfect emotional state. If you only act when you feel motivated, your progress will always be inconsistent. Your mind will constantly negotiate. Maybe tomorrow. I'm too tired. I'll do it when I feel better. I need more time. I'll start next week. And another day disappears, then another. Eventually, you realize that your life has been shaped by thousands of tiny negotiations with yourself. So, begin changing the negotiation. When your mind says, do it later, answer, I'll do 5 minutes now. When it says, you're too tired, ask, what is the smallest useful action I can still take? When it says, you might fail, answer, then I will learn. When it says, this is uncomfortable, answer, discomfort is not danger. You don't need to dominate your mind. You need to train it, passively, consistently, one decision at a time. Because if you don't learn to direct your attention, something else will direct it for you. Social media will, fear will, other people's opinions will, your impulses will, your past will, your distractions will. And slowly, you may find yourself living a life designed by everything except your own values. So take your mind back, protect your attention, choose what you consume, choose what you repeat, choose what you believe, choose what deserves your emotional energy, and, most importantly, choose your response, because life will continue to surprise you. There will always be something you cannot control. But you can become the person who remains steady in the middle of uncertainty, the person who can breathe before reacting, Think before speaking. Pause before deciding. Continue when motivation disappears. And stand back up after falling. That is mastery. Not controlling the world. Controlling yourself within the world. And when you master that, you stop being pushed around by every thought, emotion, temptation, and circumstance. You become harder to distract, harder to discourage, harder to defeat. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. So remember this. If you do not train your mind, the world will train it for you. Master your attention, master your reactions, master your habits, master your decisions. And slowly, you will begin mastering your life. There is a dangerous sentence that sounds harmless. I'll do it when I feel ready. You tell yourself you will start when you have more energy, when you have more confidence, when life becomes less complicated, when you have more time, when you feel inspired, when you finally become motivated. But what if that day never comes? What if motivation was never supposed to come first? What if you have been waiting for a feeling that is created by the very action you keep avoiding? Think about the things you have postponed. The book you wanted to read, the business you wanted to start, the workout you promised yourself you would do, the course you wanted to finish, the money you wanted to save, the conversation you needed to have, the dream you keep saying you will pursue someday. How many of these things are still waiting? Not because you don't care, but because your mind keeps negotiating with discomfort. I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes Monday. Monday becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. And eventually, the dream doesn't disappear. It simply becomes something you talk about instead of something you live. This is why you must understand the difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is a feeling. It rises, it falls, it falls. It can be powerful, but it is unpredictable. Discipline is different. Discipline says, I don't need to feel like doing this. I decided that this matters. That is a completely different mindset. If you depend on motivation, your behavior depends on your emotions. If you're excited, you work. If you're tired, you stop. If you're confident, you take action. If you're afraid, you wait. If the day is easy, you make progress. If the day becomes difficult, everything falls apart. But when discipline becomes stronger than mood, your progress becomes more consistent. You stop asking, do I feel motivated? And start asking, what did I promise myself I would do? That question changes everything, because the person you want to become is built by what you do when you don't feel like doing it. Anyone can work when they are inspired. Anyone can exercise when they feel energetic. Anyone can stay focused when everything is going perfectly. But your character is revealed in the moments when your emotions say, not today. And you answer, I'm going anyway. Now, this doesn't mean you should ignore exhaustion or treat rest as weakness. Rest matters. Recovery matters. Your body matters. Your mental well-being matters. Discipline is not destroying yourself. It is learning the difference between real limits and temporary resistance. Sometimes you genuinely need to rest. Other times, your mind simply wants comfort. And you need to learn the difference. Because discomfort has a strange way of disguising itself. You sit down to work. Suddenly, you need to check your phone. You start reading. Suddenly, you need something to eat. You begin exercising. Suddenly, you remember 10 other things you need to do. You sit down to create. Suddenly, you feel like watching something. Why? Because the brain often prefers immediate comfort over delayed rewards. Your goal is to train yourself to tolerate that discomfort, not forever, just long enough to begin. This is where the 5-minute principle becomes powerful. Tell yourself, I don't have to finish. I only have to begin. Work for 5 minutes. Write 1 page. Write 1 paragraph. Do 10 push-ups. Open the spreadsheet. Make the first call. Clean 1 corner of the room. Start. Because starting changes your psychological state. Before action, the task feels enormous. After action begins, resistance often becomes smaller. Momentum appears. 5 minutes becomes 10. 10 becomes 20. and suddenly, you are doing the thing you spent an hour avoiding. This is one of the secrets of disciplined people. They don't always have stronger emotions. They simply become better at starting. And once you start repeatedly, starting becomes easier. You teach your brain, we begin. That becomes part of your identity, and identity changes behavior. Imagine someone who says, I am trying to exercise. Compare that with, I am someone who trains. The first identity depends on motivation. The second identity creates an expectation. A person who sees themselves as someone who trains doesn't ask every morning, do I feel like exercising? They ask, when am I training? That's the difference. The same applies to work. The same applies to learning. The same applies to saving money. The same applies to creating. The same applies to almost every meaningful goal. Stop constantly negotiating with the version of yourself that wants comfort. Make decisions in advance. Decide what time you will work. Decide what you will study. Decide when you will exercise. Decide what you will not allow to distract you. Because every decision you make in advance is one less decision you have to fight with yourself about later. This is why routines are powerful. They reduce negotiation. You don't wake up and debate whether you should brush your teeth. You simply do it. You want important habits to become that automatic, not because you have lost your freedom, but because you have stopped wasting mental energy on decisions you already made. And there is another important lesson. Do not measure your progress only by results. Measure it by your consistency. You worked today. You kept your promise today. You showed up today. You resisted the distraction today. You chose the difficult thing today. Those moments matter because success is rarely one giant event. It is usually the accumulation of ordinary days handled well. One workout, one chapter, one client, one application, one saved dollar, 1 hour of focused work, one difficult conversation, one more attempt, one more day. That is how momentum is built. And momentum changes how you see yourself. You begin thinking, I am someone who follows through. That belief creates more follow-through. More follow-through creates more results. More results create more confidence. And confidence creates more action. The cycle begins working in your favor. So stop waiting for the perfect mood. You may never feel completely ready. You may always have some doubt. You may always have a reason to delay. The question is not, do I feel ready? The better question is this important enough to begin? If it is, begin. Begin badly. Begin slowly. Begin imperfectly. Begin with fear. Begin without applause. Begin without knowing exactly how everything will work out. But begin, because your future cannot be built by intentions alone. At some point, thought must become action. The dream must become a schedule. The goal must become a habit. And the habit must become part of who you are. So tomorrow morning, when your mind says, 5 more minutes, get up. When it says, I'll do it later, start now. When it says, you don't feel motivated, answer, I don't need motivation. I made a decision. And then take one step, not 10, not 100. One, because one step creates another. Another creates momentum. Momentum creates consistency. Consistency creates transformation. And transformation begins quietly on an ordinary day when nobody is watching. When you simply decide to do what you said you would do. That is discipline. That is self-respect. And that is how you stop waiting for your life to change and start changing it yourself. There will come a moment when motivation disappears. A moment when the plan doesn't work, when the opportunity doesn't arrive, when the person you trusted lets you down, when the numbers don't make sense, when the effort doesn't seem to produce results. And in that moment, your mind will ask you a simple question. Why keep going? That question can change everything, because everyone is persistent when life is rewarding them. The real test begins when life stops giving you immediate evidence that your effort is working. This is where resilience is built. Not in comfort, not in easy victories, but in the space between disappointment and your decision to continue. You need to understand something about failure. Failure is not always a verdict. Sometimes it is information. Sometimes it is feedback. Sometimes it is the price of learning something you could never have understood from success alone. You tried. It didn't work. That hurts. But now you know something you didn't know before. You know what didn't work. You know where the weakness was. You know what needs to change. You have information. And information can become an advantage if you are willing to use it. Imagine climbing a mountain. You look toward the summit. It seems impossibly far away. The weather changes. The path becomes steeper. Your legs become tired. You begin wondering whether you made a mistake. But the mountain isn't asking you to reach the summit in one step. It is asking you to take the next one. That is how difficult goals work. You don't build a business in one day. You don't become financially secure in 1 week. You don't become physically strong after one workout. You don't master a skill after one attempt. You don't completely transform your mind after listening to one audiobook. Transformation requires repetition, and repetition requires resilience. There will be days when progress is obvious. There will also be days when you feel like you are going nowhere. Those days matter too, because progress is not always visible while it is happening. A seed spends a long time underground before anyone sees a tree. Your effort may be developing something beneath the surface: patience, knowledge, skill, discipline, character, self-trust. You may not see the result yet. That doesn't automatically mean nothing is happening. This is why you must be careful about measuring your life only by immediate outcomes. If you judge every effort by instant results, you will quit too early. You will plant something today, dig it up tomorrow, and wonder why nothing grew. Give your efforts time. Give your habits time. Give yourself time. But understand the difference between persistence and stubbornness. Building a mind that doesn't quit does not mean refusing to change your strategy. Sometimes the strongest decision is not to push harder. It is to think differently. If a door remains closed, you may need another door. If one strategy fails, learn another. If your plan isn't working, adjust it. Persistence doesn't mean repeating the same mistake forever. It means refusing to let one failed attempt convince you that success is impossible. You can change the method without abandoning the mission. That distinction is powerful. Your goal may remain the same, while your approach changes completely. Think about how many times you have quit something because you confused slow progress with no progress. You started learning. You weren't good immediately, so you stopped. You started exercising. You didn't see results quickly, so you stopped. You started saving. The amount seemed too small, so you stopped. You started creating. Nobody noticed, so you stopped. You started changing your life, and then you expected the new life to appear before you had enough time to become the person capable of sustaining it. Don't make that mistake. Some of the most important transformations happen quietly. You become more patient, more focused, less reactive, more disciplined. You recover faster from setbacks. You stop needing everyone to approve of you. You stop abandoning your goals every time you feel uncomfortable. Those are victories, even if nobody applauds them. And eventually, those internal victories produce external results. But first, you have to stay in the game. That means learning how to handle disappointment. When something fails, give yourself permission to feel it. You don't have to pretend you're unaffected. You can be disappointed. You can be angry. You can be sad. You can admit, this hurts. But then ask, what now? That question is powerful. Not, why me? Not, why does this always happen? But, what now? What can I learn? What can I repair? What can I improve? What can I try next? What remains within my control? That is the language of resilience. Because resilience isn't saying, nothing can hurt me. Resilience is saying, this hurt me, but it will not define me. You can lose without becoming a loser. You can fail without becoming a failure. You can fall without becoming someone who stays down. Your response after the setback matters. Sometimes you will need to rest. Sometimes you will need to rethink everything. Sometimes you will need to walk away from something that no longer serves you. But don't confuse changing direction with giving up. A river doesn't stop when it meets a rock. It moves around it. Your path may change. Your timeline may change. Your strategy may change. But your willingness to keep becoming stronger, that can remain. This is where mental toughness is created. Every time you encounter resistance and respond intelligently instead of emotionally, you become stronger. Every time you recover from disappointment, you become stronger. Every time you continue without immediate validation, you become stronger. Every time you choose long-term growth over short-term comfort, you become stronger. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You become less afraid of difficulty, not because difficulty disappears, but because you have evidence that you can handle it. You remember the hard season you survived, the rejection you overcame, the failure that taught you, the night you thought you couldn't continue, and the morning when you got up anyway. Those experiences become psychological strength. They become proof that you can survive uncertainty, proof that you can rebuild, proof that you can adapt, proof that one bad chapter does not determine the entire story. So when the next difficult season arrives, and it will, don't immediately assume that your life is falling apart. Maybe you are being asked to grow. Maybe you are being forced to develop a skill you avoided. Maybe the obstacle is showing you that your strategy needs to change. Maybe the delay is teaching you patience. Maybe the failure is giving you information. You don't have to know exactly why something happened. You simply need to decide what you will do with it. That is where your power lives, in the response, in the next decision, in the next attempt, in the next morning, when you get up and continue. Build a mind that doesn't quit, but also build a mind that learns, a mind that adapts, a mind that can say, I was wrong, I need help, I need a new strategy, I need to start again. Those are not signs of weakness, they are signs of maturity, because the strongest people are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who refuse to let struggle become the end of their story. So when you reach the point where your mind whispers, it's too hard, pause, look at how far you have already come, then ask, what is the next step? Not the whole staircase, just the next step. Take it, then another, and another, until one day you look back and realize something. The mountain never became smaller. You became stronger. And that is the goal, not a life without obstacles. A mind strong enough to keep moving through them. A mind that bends without breaking. A mind that learns without surrendering. A mind that falls, gets back up and continues. Because your future may depend on one simple decision you make again and again. I am not finished yet. There is a question that can change the direction of your life, not, what do I want? But, who do I need to become? Most people spend their lives thinking about what they want to have. More money, more freedom, more confidence, a better body, a successful business, a peaceful mind, a meaningful relationship, a better future. There is nothing wrong with wanting these things. But wanting a different life is only the beginning, because every life you admire is supported by a version of someone you cannot always see. You see the success, but you don't see the discipline. You see the confidence, but you don't see the years of rejection. You see the freedom, but you don't see the sacrifices. You see the finished result, but you don't see the person they had to become to create it. And this is where many people get stuck. They want the destination without becoming the person capable of sustaining the destination. They want success without consistency, freedom without responsibility, confidence without discomfort, results without repetition. But life doesn't work that way. Your future requires something from you. And the question is, are you willing to become it? If you want a stronger body, you must become someone who trains consistently. If you want financial stability, you must become someone who can control spending. develop valuable skills, and make thoughtful decisions. If you want a successful career, you must become someone who learns, communicates, solves problems, and keeps improving. If you want confidence, you must become someone willing to act while uncertainty is still present. If you want peace, you must become someone who protects their attention and stops allowing every external event to control their internal world. The future is not simply something you arrive at. It is something you become capable of living. Think about the person you want to be 5 years from now. Imagine them waking up. How do they think? How do they spend their time? What do they refuse to tolerate? What habits do they protect? What distractions have they eliminated? How do they handle pressure? How do they speak to themselves? How do they respond when things go wrong? Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. Are your current habits moving you toward that person or away from them? Because your future self is being created by your current self. Every day is a vote. Every choice is a vote. Every habit is a vote. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you vote for the person you want to become. Every time you choose learning over excuses, you vote for your future. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you vote for self-trust. Every time you choose courage over avoidance, you vote for confidence. But the opposite is also true. Every time you repeatedly choose distraction over your goals, you are voting for a different future. Every time you tell yourself, tomorrow, you are making a decision about today, and enough tomorrows can become an entire life. This is why transformation often feels uncomfortable. You are not simply changing your habits. You are challenging an old identity. The old version of you wants familiarity. It says, this is how we've always done it. Stay comfortable. Don't risk failure. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't try something new. But the future version of you is asking for something different. It is asking for courage. It is asking for patience. It is asking for discipline. It is asking you to tolerate being uncomfortable long enough to become stronger. And sometimes, that means disappointing the version of you that only wants immediate comfort. You may have to wake up earlier. You may have to say no. You may have to spend less. You may have to study when others are relaxing. You may have to work when nobody is applauding. You may have to walk away from environments that keep pulling you backward. You may have to stop explaining your dreams to people who have already decided they won't understand them. Growth often requires separation from old patterns, not because you are better than anyone else, but because you finally understand where you want to go, and the clearer your destination becomes, the more intentional your choices must become. Ask yourself, what would the person I want to become do today, not someday? Today, would they spend another hour scrolling? Would they keep avoiding the task? Would they continue feeding the fear? Would they keep making excuses? Or would they take one meaningful step? You don't need to become your future self overnight. You only need to start behaving like them in small ways. If your future self is disciplined, practice discipline today. If your future self is confident, practice courage today. If your future self is healthy, make one healthier decision today. If your future self is financially responsible, make one wiser financial decision today. If your future self is peaceful, protect your attention today. This is how identity changes, not through imagination alone, through evidence. You give yourself evidence every day, and eventually the evidence becomes belief. The belief becomes identity, and identity influences your future decisions. This is why you should stop asking, when will I finally become successful? Ask, what would a successful version of me do today? Stop asking, when will I finally become disciplined? Ask, what would a disciplined person do in this moment? Stop asking, when will I become confident? Ask, what would a confident person do while still feeling afraid? The answer will often be surprisingly simple. Make the call. Open the book. Do the workout. Save the money. Tap the page. Bali for the opportunity. Have the conversation. Turn off the distraction. Get back up. The future is built through ordinary actions. And this is why you should never underestimate today's small decision. The 5 minutes you spend learning, the 20 minutes you spend exercising, the decision to close the social media app, the decisions to save instead of spend, the decision to tell yourself the truth, the decision to keep going. These moments may feel insignificant, but they are shaping your identity. And your identity is shaping your future. There is another question you should ask yourself. What does my future self need me to stop doing? Maybe it's constant comparison. Maybe it's procrastination. Maybe it's seeking everyone's approval. Maybe it's wasting your attention. Maybe it's making decisions based entirely on fear. Maybe it's constantly talking about your plans without acting on them. You don't have to change everything at once. Choose one thing, empowered one destructive pattern, build one powerful habit, then another. This is how transformation becomes sustainable. You are not trying to create a perfect life. You are creating a stronger version of yourself. And that person will still have bad days. They will still make mistakes. They will still experience fear. They will still face uncertainty. But they will respond differently. That is the real transformation, not becoming someone who never struggles. Becoming someone who knows how to continue. Someone who knows how to recover. Someone who knows how to learn. Someone who knows how to begin again. So imagine meeting your future self one day, standing face to face with the person you eventually became. Would they thank you? Would they say, "Thank you for starting when you were afraid. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for choosing discipline. Thank you for protecting your mind. Thank you for taking care of the opportunities you had. Thank you for believing that you could become more." Your future self is not asking you to be perfect. They are asking you to begin, to make one decision today that makes tomorrow easier, to choose one habit that makes you stronger, to release one belief that keeps you small, to take one step toward the person you know you can become, because your future is not waiting somewhere far away. It is being built quietly, right now, in this moment, through the thoughts you think, the choices you make, the habits you repeat, and the standards you decide to live by. So don't just dream about the life you want. Become the person who can create it. Become disciplined. Become courageous. Become patient. Become focused. Become resilient. Become responsible for your choices. Become someone you can trust, and one day, you will look back and realize the life you once wished for was being built by the person you were becoming all along. Now, take a breath. Slowly, let everything become quiet for a moment. You have spent the last 26 minutes looking inward at your thoughts, your beliefs, your habits, your reactions, your discipline, your identity. And now it is time to decide what comes next. Because knowing is not enough. You can understand how the mind works and still return to the same patterns tomorrow. You can recognize your negative thoughts and still obey them. You can know what discipline requires and still choose comfort. Transformation happens when knowledge becomes a decision. So from this moment forward, begin creating a new mental code, not a collection of empty affirmations, not words you repeat without action, but principles you choose to live by. A code for the person you are becoming. I do not have to believe every thought that enters my mind. Some thoughts are fear, some are old conditioning, some are simply noise. I can observe them without obeying them. I choose my response. I may not control what happens. I may not control what people say. I may not control every outcome, but I can choose how I respond. I can pause. I can breathe. I can think. Then I can act. I do not need to feel ready to begin. Fear can come with me. Doubt can come with me. Uncertainty can come with me. I don't have to wait for them to disappear. I can move forward while they are still present. I can learn what I do not yet know. I don't have to be naturally gifted. I don't have to understand everything immediately. I can study. I can practice. I can ask questions. I can make mistakes. I can improve. Not yet does not mean never. I keep promises to myself when I say, I will do something. I make an effort to follow through because every promise I keep strengthens self-trust. And every time I prove that I can depend on myself, my confidence grows. I choose discipline over temporary comfort. I understand that what feels good now is not always what serves me later. I can delay gratification. I can tolerate discomfort. I can do difficult things. Because the future I want requires a stronger version of me. I protect my attention. My attention is valuable. I will not give it away carelessly. I will be more intentional about what I watch, what I read, what I listen to, who I allow to influence me, and what thoughts I repeatedly entertain, because what receives my attention receives a piece of my life. I refuse to make one bad moment my entire identity. I can fail without becoming a failure. I can lose without becoming a loser. I can make a mistake without becoming my mistake. I can fall without deciding that I am finished. I can begin again. I focus on what I can control. I cannot control everything, and I no longer need to. I will focus on my effort, my preparation, my habits, my choices, my attitude, my next step. That is where my power is. I do not compare my chapter to someone else's entire story. Their path is theirs. Mine is mine. Their timing is theirs. Mine is mine. I can admire someone else's success without using it as evidence against myself. Someone else's progress does not mean my progress is impossible. There is room for me too. I choose progress over perfection. I don't need to do everything perfectly. I need to keep moving. A small step is still a step. A difficult beginning is still a beginning. An imperfect attempt is still an attempt. I will improve through action. I allow myself to change. I am not permanently defined by who I was. I am not trapped by old habits. I am not required to repeat old patterns. I can become different. I can think differently. I can live differently. I can become stronger. And perhaps most importantly, I believe that my future can be different from my past. Not because life will always be easy. Not because everything will happen exactly as I want, but because I am capable of changing how I respond. I am capable of learning. I am capable of rebuilding. I am capable of taking responsibility. I am capable of becoming stronger. So when tomorrow comes and the old thoughts return, remember this code. When your mind says, you can't, answer, I can learn. When it says, it's too late, answer, I can begin now. When it says, you're not good enough, answer, I can grow. When it says, just quit, answer, take one more step. When it says, wait until you feel motivated, answer, I already decided. When it says, everyone is ahead of you, answer, I am building my own path. When it says, this is who you are, answer, this is where I am, and I am still becoming. These are not magical words. They are reminders of the choices available to you. Because the goal was never to create a mind that thinks only positive thoughts. The goal is to create a mind that is conscious, a mind that questions, a mind that chooses, a mind that can experience fear without surrendering to it, a mind that can experience failure without becoming defined by it, a mind that can experience discomfort without immediately escaping it, a mind that can see difficulty and still say, what is the next step? That is the new mental code. You don't need to become a completely different person tonight. You simply need to make a different decision tomorrow. Then another, until the choices that once required enormous effort begin to feel natural. Until discipline becomes familiar. Until courage becomes familiar. Until focus becomes familiar. Until self-trust becomes familiar. Until the person you once imagined becoming starts looking back at you in the mirror. So take a final breath and remember, your thoughts matter, your beliefs matter, your actions matter, your habits matter, but above all, your choices matter. You are not powerless. You are not finished. You are not permanently stuck. You are becoming. And from this moment forward, be intentional about what you become. Now, before this journey ends, take one final moment to look at your life from a different perspective. Maybe everything around you has not changed. Maybe the problems you had before listening to this audiobook are still waiting for you. The bills may still exist. The uncertainty may still exist. The difficult conversation may still need to happen. The dream may still be unfinished. The circumstances may not have changed overnight. And that's okay, because this was never about pretending that life is easy. It was about understanding that you have more influence over your inner world than you may have realized. You cannot control everything that happens to you. You cannot control every person, every outcome, every opportunity, every loss, every delay, every disappointment. But you can begin to control what you repeatedly tell yourself about those things. You can choose whether failure becomes an identity or information. You can choose whether fear becomes a prison or a signal to grow. You can choose whether disappointment becomes the end or the beginning of a new direction. You can choose what deserves your attention. You can choose what habits you repeat. You can choose whether you keep the promises you make to yourself. And those choices matter, because your life is not transformed in one dramatic moment. It is transformed quietly, in the morning when you decide to get up, in the moment when you choose focus over distraction, in the moment when you choose discipline over comfort, in the moment when you challenge a negative thought, in the moment when you decide not to give up. Nobody may see those moments. Nobody may applaud. Nobody may even know they happened. But you will know, and your mind will know, because every small decision is evidence of who you are becoming. Maybe you have spent years believing that you are behind. Maybe you have spent years doubting yourself. Maybe you have allowed fear to make too many decisions. Maybe you have been waiting for permission to begin. You don't need permission anymore. You don't need a perfect past. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need to know exactly how everything will work out. You need a direction. And then, you need the courage to take the next step. Your life can change, not necessarily because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you become different within it. You become more disciplined, more aware, more resilient, more patient, more intentional, more courageous. And when you change, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your habits change. When your habits change, your identity changes. And when your identity changes, the possibilities available to you begin to change. That is the power of the mind. Not magic, not wishful thinking, but the extraordinary influence of repeated thoughts, beliefs, choices, and actions. So remember this: your past is information. It is not a prison. Your mistakes are lessons. They are not your identity. Your fear is a feeling. It is not a command. Your circumstances are real, but they do not have to determine your response. And your future is not written yet. There are still decisions you haven't made, skills you haven't learned, people you haven't met, places you haven't seen, opportunities you haven't discovered, versions of yourself you haven't become. So don't let today's limitations convince you that tomorrow has no possibilities. You are still becoming, and perhaps the most important thing you can do from this moment forward is simple. Be careful what you repeatedly tell yourself, because your mind is listening. When you tell yourself, "I can't," your behavior will begin searching for reasons to stop. But when you tell yourself, "I can learn," you begin searching for a way forward. When you tell yourself, "It's too late," you close the door. When you tell yourself, "I can begin today," you open it. When you tell yourself, "I'm not enough," you shrink. When you tell yourself, "I can become better," you create room to grow. So choose your thoughts carefully, not because every thought has the power to magically change your circumstances, but because your thoughts influence your attention. Your attention influences your decisions. Your decisions influence your habits. Your habits influence your identity. And your identity influences the direction of your life. This is your reminder. You don't have to change everything today. Chant one thought, then one decision, then one habit, then another. Keep going, keep learning, keep becoming. And one day, you may look back at this moment and realize the transformation did not begin when your circumstances changed. It began when you changed. It began when you stopped saying, "This is who I am," and started saying, "This is who I am becoming." So if you remember nothing else from this audiobook, remember these words. Your mind matters. Your thoughts matter. Your beliefs matter. Your actions matter. Your habits matter. And the person you become is being shaped by what you repeatedly choose. So choose carefully, think intentionally, act courageously, live deliberately. And when life becomes difficult, don't immediately ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, "Who can I become because of this?" Because you may not control every chapter, but you can influence the person writing the next one. And that person is you. So take a breath, lift your head, look forward. The past is behind you. The next decision is in front of you. And your next chapter is waiting. Challenge your thoughts, challenge your actions, challenge your habits, challenge your identity. And slowly, one day at a time, you can change your life. You are not finished, you are becoming. And your best chapters may still be unwritten. Now, go live them.